Welcome everyone, Questin here with a discussion about Kislev in Total War Warhammer 3, Thrones of Decay patch 5.0, and the secret or maybe not so secret buff that Kislev is going to get with this patch. Now there's nothing changed about Kislev directly, the same issues with devotion, supporters, victory conditions, etc, they still exist. That is not different. However, there are a couple of things that Creative Assembly has changed in the world with this patch, with Thrones of Decay, that are going to really help out in a Kislev campaign. So let's just go over those very quickly over here. So one of the problems is that you've got the unholy trio of Azazel, Throt, and Trog over here. And in every single Kislev campaign that you play on the current live version, these three are a freaking nightmare. Not just because there's one powerful Legendary Lord, but because there's three powerful Legendary Lords. Okay, you can say a lot of things about Norsk, but here's the thing. In the hands of the player, Norsk is a pain to play. In the hands of the AI, which has a much better economy, much better casualty replenishment growth, etc., these issues go away, and it's fairly common to end up in situations where Trog is throwing 3-4 full stacks against you. And if you let him get to Marauder Champions, he's going to start spamming Marauder Champions, just from this one province, the Mountains of Hell. And long term, you're obviously also going to have to deal with Wilfred, because natural expansion. Azazel, he may not have so many armies, but still a problem. Then Throt, Skaven being Skaven. I mean, one-on-one, you can absolutely smash his early game army, but when he brings 3-4 stacks, it's nasty. So what's changed with that? Well, Malachi is now in Krakadrak. And because of that, what that means really is that both Throt and Trog, maybe to some extent Azazel, are going to have a much harder time coming in from the north to attack you down south. Which means you have a lot more time, you have a lot more flexibility in your campaign as Kislev in all Kislev campaigns. Be it Kastaltin, Katrin, Boris Ursus, Astankia, different affair unless Kislev is burning, which by the way, Kislev can still fall even with this patch. So like, even despite Malachi is going to buy you time. He's not necessarily going to win the game for you. But just that buying time reduces a lot of the stress that you have as a player in a Kislev campaign. Hell, one could potentially argue even Tamarkan might be a benefit, though usually Tamarkan does go here. He starts at War Kolek. So that's the first benefit. The second benefit is that now all of Norska is either mountain or frozen. It used to be a lot of cast wastes or combined provinces. Some cast wastes, some frozen, some mountains, sure. But now all of them, all the territories, all the regions over here are frozen in mountains. And one of the problems that Kislev has, beyond the fact that they have a bad economy, is that you're constantly harassed from the north. You have an incentive because of devotion to go fight chaos, but fighting chaos is a miserable experience. Not because they're so brutal, though obviously they are pretty powerful, but also the fact that the reward territorial-wise, like Kislev's economy is bad enough in good climate. In bad climate, it's miserable. Yes, CA did add a commandment that helps you with that if you're in a province with any kind of cast wasteland climate, but just having it by default as either frozen or mountains means a couple of things. One, you won't take the same level of attrition that you did before. Obviously, cast corruption is still going to cause attrition, but cast wasteland regions generally, like, fairly nasty places. So one, you're not going to have the same issues with attrition. You're going to replenish much quicker. You're going to be able to recover from fights quicker. You're going to be able to recruit. You're going to be able to build. And what that means is, from a practical standpoint, is that with patch 5.0, you can now play a campaign in Kislev, or rather a campaign as Kislev in Kislev, and actually do the things that Kislev should have been doing from the very start, which is focusing on defending the north, defeating the threats over here. Because now, like if you're playing Kastaltin, Boris Ursus, Katrin, you can certainly do so. Like Boris Ursus is still the best campaign, even though he starts in Chaotic Wasteland, but still, it is certainly a benefit. One could also argue that Epidemius over here, right next to Malice Darkblade, is kind of a bit of an indirect buff. Somewhat. So here's the thing. Demon Prince is annoying, right? But Demon Prince starts here, and he would have taken out this faction, Nurgle. And usually, many times, he would not find Malice Darkblade. From what I'm seeing so far in my experience in the patch, Malice Darkblade has a bigger tendency of fighting Nurgle. As it is. Just one thing. Also, if you're playing a campaign as Boris Ursus, you no longer have to deal with these Siege faction, because these guys could be annoying as Boris Ursus. But now, since both Daniel and Epidemius are at war with the Siege faction over here in the Crystal Spires, they are not going to be a threat. Like, you could argue Epidemius is a bigger threat, but he's far enough away that he won't be an immediate threat. So, some of the pressure gets removed, and, you know, they could all three here could end up fighting each other. So, that's another benefit over there. And then finally, we can talk about the Empire and Dwarves. So, the Dwarves and Empire obviously have been improved. And what that really means from a practical standpoint in your campaign is that while obviously, you know, Festus, because there's 3 threats to the south as well. It's not like, oh, you just have the Unholy Trio to the north. You have 3 major threats to the south as well. You got Festus, you've got Draika, you've got Azak. So because of the changes to the Empire and Dwarves, what that really means for you in a Kislev campaign is that you may end up with fewer situations where you just have the stampede of greenskins from Azak, or you have less annoyance from Draika, which can happen quite often. Like, I'm sure many people have lost Katrin campaigns because Draika showed up with an entire stack while you were trying to hold up the forces in the north. That will probably still happen, but, you know, less pressure. Less pressure from Festus, less pressure potentially from Azak. Obviously, it is randomized based on faction potential. So to understand that, whenever you start a campaign of the Legendary Lords of the major factions, some of them are going to be stronger than others because of faction potential. But that's randomized at the beginning of a campaign. Still, the fact that the Empire is better should help with things. Hell, it might even help with dealing with Vlad, who can also be a problem in a Kislev campaign, as I found out playing Katrin rather recently. Speaking about that, we also have to get into Elspeth. So Elspeth can actually be indirectly, very indirectly beneficial here against Vlad. Not necessarily all the time, but here's what you want to consider with Elspeth versus Gelt, who's now in Cafe. So it used to be that Gelt would take Solent and then sit AFK for a very, very long time. That was because of his AI, faction diplomatic limitations between the Empire, all that. Elspeth, she starts in Null. She's going to take these 2 provinces, but because she shares a direct border with Stirland, which typically at least some portion of it is going to fall under Vlad's control, you're usually going to see a war between Elspeth and Vlad. Regardless of who wins that war, that's not really important. The important thing is Vlad now has someone that is actually going to be able to stop him or at least slow him down earlier on. Like later on in many campaigns I had played, Vlad does tend to lose, like Gelt would eventually get off his ass and actually do something about it, or even if it didn't, Karl Franz would get the power level. But now the Empire is stronger, Elspeth is more active than Gelt, so if you're looking to conquer Sylvania, which is a really still very useful territory because of the gold, because of its very defensible position, same with Zufbar, then you might end up in a better position. So all of these things combined, I believe, like especially Malachi, like really reducing the pressure on you from the north. Though I have noticed his AI tends to be pretty passive. But all of these things combined reduces both the pressure that you face in a Kislev campaign from the north and the south. Which means you have more breathing room, which means you're not stressed out, which means that you don't feel like you're having to play this campaign, constantly bankrupting yourself to maintain the armies to deal with all of this. Because that's one of the problems that exists in the current live version of the game. While it would still be nice to get Kislev racial updates, you know, we take what we can get, right? Shadows of Change is what it is. That's all I had to say. Costin signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more. Oh, and just a final point. The fact that ranged seemingly works a lot better in the patch in Thrones of Decay. than it currently does in live is also a Kislev butt, because guess what? You've got a lot of range units. It will help your Streltsy. It will help your range lord, like if you want to use Drazinas, for instance. That's also going to be a net benefit in your campaign. So all of this combined is very useful. Stay tuned for more.